this is Reverend Don Lewis coming to you from beautiful Florida, and this is Reverend Don's Vlog. And tonight, our question comes to us from Michael at the Temple of the Starry Sky. And this is the question. Um, Michael remarks upon how people from some backgrounds believe in hard and fast rules that must always be observed when practicing magic, while others believe there are no rules, only guidelines. And that there are also many people who fall somewhere in between, and Michael would like to know what my thoughts are on this. And my attitude is not going to be a surprise to anyone who has followed my materials, or at least I don't think it will be a surprise. Obviously, I do not believe in the everything must be exactly so point of view. There certainly are different traditions of magic which have very exact practices, and they believe that they must be exactly followed or it's not going to be successful. But the thing is that there are many of these. Their practices are not universal, they're sometimes contradictory, and according to their members, they all work. Therefore, it follows that those precise practices cannot be that necessary if all these different branches of magic actually work. Now, we could assume, of course, that they don't. But I choose to assume that when people say they're having these experiences, they're truly having them, because I know that when I talk about my experiences, I've truly had them. And I don't really find it advantageous to doubt others saying the same thing. My grandmother had a theory about religion, which is basically this same idea. And I'm going to paraphrase very loosely, but her attitude was that all of the religions in the world manifest the same um, basic benefits to their followers. People pray, they feel their prayers are answered. People have miracles and magic and other things that demonstrate the power of spirit in their lives, regardless of what religion they belong to. Ask people from many different religions and they'll all tell you. They've had these experiences, not every individual, of course, but the different movements all basically have their magic and their miracles and their answered prayers and so forth. And that leaves you to either assume they're all lying or they're all telling the truth. I assume they're all telling the truth. When people tell me that they believe that magic can only be done in very precise ways, I believe they're telling the truth. I just don't agree with them. I want to say hello to Arlene Freed in the chat room and Eric Hebert. Welcome. My thought is that when we see that people from different backgrounds have successful outcomes doing magic in different ways, then different ways must work. Does that mean there's no rules? Well, no, it doesn't really mean that. But it does mean that tiny procedural rules that some traditions are very fond of aren't necessarily really that necessary. I do believe there are certain rules to the way magic works, but they're not the kind of ones that the it must be done exactly this way crowd usually want to cite. I think that magic, I think one of the most important rules of magic is you need to be clear on what you want. And we've talked about this in other vlogs. We've talked about shadow work and why it's important. I think that's a major rule of magic. I think you must be willing to accept what you're creating. I think that's another major rule of magic. You must be clear in creating it. You must be willing to accept it. You must be clear in yourself. I've watched people, not even intentionally doing magic, but I've watched them manifest the very thing they fear because it's the only thing they'll accept. These are rules of magic, and if you've read things I've written about magic, you'll see that I talk about what is necessary for it to actually work. But it isn't doing it at the exact hour of the exact day of whatever almanac. It isn't having these exact colors. Those things can be helpful as keys, but if they were necessary, then only the people who came from that background would ever be able to work magic. And that simply isn't what we see in the world. And if you've worked with different people from different backgrounds, you not only have their word for the fact that they have experiences, but you'll have experienced it with them. I have found working with people who are not necessarily approaching things the way that I approach them, that I've seen them do what they set out to do and be successful. Therefore, I don't doubt that they are, in fact, practicing magic and being successful, even though they do it differently than I do. Um, I think that I want to say hello to Sean Shed Quintus in the chat room. Welcome. I think that the rules of magic are actually quite simple and common sense. Um, and people often try to make them very elaborate. And I think they damage themselves in that process. Because I think that if you're convinced you can only do things a certain way, then you'll find you only can, um, unless you're willing to open to other possibilities. One of the things I was thinking about as I was preparing for this vlog is um, color theory. And when we look at color theory, there are certain rules. If you put blue and yellow together, they're going to make green. That will always be true. However, there are so many different variables that will affect how it is true. Those variables are also things. Um, but by changing the variables, you can change your result. For example, if you're putting together oil paints, you're going to have um, one reaction. If you're putting together acrylic paints, it may be a little bit different. If you're doing watercolors, it may be a little different again. If you're working with ink, it may be very different from all the paints, depending on exactly what you're trying to do. But in the end, the way that colors combine are still how they combine. Now, when you go to use them in an artwork, however, the medium you're using, what you're putting it on, these things are very important also. Because, um, for example, water paint, if you're putting it on a canvas that already has color on it, it's not necessarily going to cover the color that's already there. It will create yet another color. And so these are all things that are different ways that you can apply color theory, but that isn't because there aren't rules underneath it. But the idea that you must dip your brush 3 times to get the pigment onto it, or that you can only do this on a Thursday, would be ridiculous. I am aware, certainly, that there are many different ways of approaching magic. And I think that whatever tradition you choose to follow, that's perfectly fine. And many of those traditions do have rigid rules, and that's perfectly fine as long as you don't make the mistake of thinking it's the only way it can be done. Because all you have to do is look at other practitioners to see it's not the only way it can be done. So my answer to this is that I wouldn't describe myself as taking the point of view that there are no rules, but rather that those rules are painted with a broad brush, and that it's not the little things that are the rules. Those are embellishments. But there are underlying principles, and these are important. But it can be done in so many different ways. And most often when you hear people talking about rules, they're really talking about the rules of their tradition and the idea that everyone else is wrong. That's not been my experience. And I base my answer on experience as opposed to simply opinion. I have worked with people from different backgrounds. I've even worked in different backgrounds and had good results and seen other people have good results. Therefore, it's not possible that only one way works. So that's my answer to that. And let me see if there are any questions or comments in the chat room. I don't see any. If you do have any questions for the vlog, you can put them in the comments section where you see this video. You can send them to me at donlewishp@aol.com. You can put them on my Facebook page. And in some future vlog, I will address your question. And please feel free to hit like, subscribe, or share according to what platform you're watching the vlog on. And I hope that you've enjoyed it. At 9 p.m. Central tonight, I will be doing Chancellor's Chat, which I have been doing every Monday night since 1998, with a few individual exceptions. And I hope you'll join me for that. And until next time, may you blessed